From a very early age, without even realizing it, a certain idea is implanted in you. A belief in your own inadequacy. You didn't choose this belief. It was implanted subtly, in looks, and snide comments, and silent comparisons. We grow up in a society that trains us to see ourselves as a problem to be fixed, a flaw to be hidden, a shame to be carried. School, family, friends, the media all contribute to this invisible molding. And gradually, you begin to believe that there is something fundamentally wrong with you, simply because you are you. Alfred Adler, one of the greatest psychologists, saw this harsh truth long before it became widely known. He realized that feelings of inferiority are not innate. It is an artificial creation, the result of comparisons, unrealistic expectations, and failures that, instead of being accepted as part of life's journey, are used as arguments for self-deprecation. You were not born hating yourself. You were taught it. And as long as you continue to carry this belief as if it were your own, you will remain shackled by a lie that was not of your own making, but which only you can now destroy. Today, we will expose this lie. We will break through the veil of illusion that has led you to believe that you are small, incapable, or worthless. We will delve into Adler's ideas, understand his uncompromising view of the inferiority complex, and reveal the cure he offers. A path based not on superficial self-help, but on a profound transformation of your perception of yourself and your place in the world. The truth is simple: as long as you believe that you are less than you really are, the world will continue to treat you accordingly. If you are ready to face the source of your pain and reclaim the power that has always been yours, let's destroy this lie. Let's rebuild your self-image, and this time, consciously. In the early 20th century, Alfred Adler, moving away from the more deterministic views of psychoanalysis, introduced one of the most influential and dangerous concepts in psychology, the inferiority complex. According to Adler, the feeling of one's own inadequacy was not just an individual shortcoming or an isolated consequence of someone's life. It was an integral part of the human experience. Every person from childhood is faced with the awareness of their smallness in this world. We are vulnerable, helpless, dependent. And it is this initial feeling that becomes fertile ground on which an inferiority complex can develop. A child, realizing his limitations, naturally feels that he is missing something. In itself, this feeling is not destructive. On the contrary, Adler believed that this sense of inferiority can become a driving force for overcoming difficulties, for personal growth, and for achieving great success. The energy behind great achievements comes from the awareness that we are not yet who we could be. It is the tension between our current state and our potential future that fuels our drive to grow. The problem is that this healthy impulse can easily be distorted. And here lies the source of the real poison. When a child is constantly confronted with criticism, neglect, rejection, comparison, and unrealistic expectations, the feeling of inferiority ceases to be a stimulus for growth and becomes an unhealing wound, a painful conviction of his own inherent inadequacy. It is no longer a question of his need to grow. It is a question of his conviction that there is something fundamentally wrong with him. Families often sow these seeds unknowingly by making excessive demands, comparing their children to each other, and projecting their own frustrations onto their offspring. Phrases like, "Why can't you be like your brother?" "You never do anything right," or even the cold silence following a failed attempt, create a toxic narrative in the young person's soul: "I'm inferior. I'm lacking." Adler also noted that this feeling is reinforced in a school environment where standardization and comparison are the foundation of the system. Individuality is not taken into account. What matters is how well one fits into the soulless metrics of academic achievement. Personal worth becomes measured not by character, sensitivity, or courage, but by numbers, awards, and external validation. Thus, what should be a natural stage of human development, the recognition of limitations and the desire to overcome them, degenerates into an identity marked by shame, insecurity, and self-sabotage. The child learns not only to recognize his shortcomings, but also to identify with them. He says not "I made a mistake," but "I am the mistake." Adler went even further in his thinking. He realized that once an inferiority complex takes hold, it creates a self-perpetuating system. A person consumed by a sense of his own insignificance begins to avoid challenges, unconsciously hinder himself in the face of new opportunities, strives at all costs to hide his weaknesses, thereby further strengthening his belief in his own inadequacy. It is a ruthless, vicious circle. The feeling of inferiority feeds avoidance, and avoidance, in turn, reinforces the feeling of inferiority. And in the end, the person turns into a frightened semblance of what he could have been. However, Adler did not consider this an inevitable fate. In his view, the source of the complex was also the key to overcoming it. Realizing that the feeling of inferiority was internalized and not an absolute truth is the first step to breaking the inner prison. So before you go any further, stop and think. What have you been taught about who you are? What ideas, embedded in your young mind, continue to silently govern your decisions, your fears, your limitations? Because now that you understand how your inferiority complex was born, it is time to dig deeper to understand how the world you live in actively works every day to maintain and even benefit from this feeling in you. If the inferiority complex begins in childhood, as Adler showed, then society acts as the fuel that keeps this fire going, sometimes to the point of an internal conflagration. You need to realize that the world we live in is not interested in your liberation. Its viability depends on your insecurity. From a very early age, you were placed in systems that constantly reinforce the idea that there is something wrong with you, simply because you are you. School was your first laboratory of systematic comparison. From the very beginning, you learned that there is an invisible scale by which your worth will be judged. Grades, tests, sports competitions, performance ratings. Your unique potential, hidden talents, or distinctive features don't matter. Everything comes down to numbers, places, and awards. Every minor failure, every small victory of others is a silent reminder, you are not enough. You are still lacking. And that was just the beginning. The society you grew up in was designed to exploit your doubts as an economic resource. The media, which was supposed to expand your view of the world, turned into a factory of unattainable standards. Advertising, movies, social media, they all feed the idea every day that there is an ideal model of success, beauty, happiness, and that you are obviously still far from it. The goal is not to inform or inspire. The goal is to awaken desire. And desire arises from a sense of lack. Every image, every campaign, every influencer exists to reinforce the idea that in order to be worthy, noticeable, loved, you need to consume something, a product, a certain lifestyle, a new identity. And then along comes the market, insatiable, offering solutions to the problems it helped create. Feeling inadequate? Buy new clothes. Feeling insecure? Take a personal development course. Feeling unhappy? Change your appearance. Companies don't just sell products. They sell the hope of acceptance. They sell the illusion that you can finally be good enough if you buy what they offer. And when the promised relief doesn't come, because it never will, the cycle repeats: more dissatisfaction, more consumption, more control. The dynamic is both subtle and cruel. Comparison culture becomes the norm. You are constantly being pushed to evaluate yourself. Social media amplifies this mercilessly. You compare not only your body, your life, and your achievements. You even compare how you experience pain, how you suffer, how you overcome difficulties. Nothing is truly yours. Everything becomes a stage. Everything becomes a performance. Even human relationships are distorted within this system. Relationships become unspoken agreements for mutual validation of significance. You are important as long as you live up to expectations. You are loved as long as you play the role assigned to you. Who you really are, with your flaws, your doubts, your hidden struggles, is rarely accepted. Often, not even by yourself. Adler understood that humans, being social creatures by nature, are also vulnerable to social manipulation. When society values only superficial glitter, external success, and the appearance of happiness, it pushes you to live a life of show. You wear masks not to protect yourself from others, but to protect yourself from a society that turns any imperfection into an excuse for exclusion. And so, day after day, You are taught to believe in your inferiority not by accident, but by design. Not because you are inferior, but because the entire system needs you to continue to feel that way in order to function. Now that you understand this mechanism, it is time to understand the breakthrough that Adler offered. Because, contrary to what the world taught you, overcoming feelings of inferiority is not about becoming better in the eyes of others. This is a complete transcendence of the comparison game. While many psychologists of the era were delving deep into theories of trauma, unconscious drives, and psychic fatalism, Alfred Adler did something extraordinary. He rejected the idea that people were victims, doomed by their circumstances. Adler saw what others had missed, the human capacity to overcome our own wounds. For him, feelings of inferiority were not just an inevitable curse. They were also a hidden potential, an untapped force that, if understood and channeled, could become the lever for true greatness. Adler introduced the idea of compensation, a concept as powerful as it was exciting. According to his theory, every perceived inferiority creates in us a need to overcome. A weak child can grow into a strong adult. An insecure youth can blossom into a charismatic leader. A rejected soul can form deeper bonds of solidarity than those who have never suffered. But, and here is the point that almost no one realizes, this transformation occurs only when inferiority is faced, acknowledged without shame, and used as fuel rather than as a chain. Adler also warned, most people, unable to cope with the pain of their own feelings of inadequacy, choose the path of false superiority. They strive for status, power, approval, trying to hide their wounds behind the fragile masks of success. They are trying to compensate not for their true inferiority, but for the illusion they have created about themselves. And in the end they find themselves trapped in an endless struggle, where each achievement brings only more emptiness, more fear of exposure, more resentment towards themselves and the world. Adler revolutionizes the traditional view by arguing that it is not the deficiency itself that destroys you, but how you choose to interact with it. You can choose to be a perpetual slave to comparison, or you can make the story of your pain the foundation of your strength. The choice, though it may seem counterintuitive, is happening right now, as you listen to these words. But to truly transform yourself, you must destroy the destructive belief you have been taught, that you are a defect that needs to be fixed. As long as you believe this, any attempt to change will be just another act of self-hatred. In a world that thrives on your insecurities, believing you are defective makes you the perfect consumer, the perfect servant for systems that depend on your constant dissatisfaction. But Alfred Adler saw a cruel truth that few dare admit: you don't need to be fixed. You need to be understood. You need to awaken to what already exists within you, not to this false, artificial, socially sanctioned version of what it means to be complete. Since childhood, all you've heard has been, be better. Do more. Achieve what's expected of you. These words weren't just encouragements. They were subtle, repeated blows, like hammer blows to your sense of self-worth. Gradually, you stopped questioning who you really were and began to measure yourself solely by what you weren't, what you lacked, who you were supposed to be according to absurdly unattainable standards. Adler argued that a healthy person is not one who eliminates all of his flaws or becomes flawless. It is one who integrates his weaknesses, his imperfections, his limitations, and builds something great out of them. It is one who understands that vulnerability is not a cause for shame. It is the raw material for true strength. That there is no real growth as long as you hate yourself. That the desire for change only becomes real when it comes from a place of self-respect and compassion, not self-rejection. You are not the failure you have been taught to see yourself as. You are the sum of your struggles, your silent resistance, the days when you were ready to give up but still kept moving forward. Every wound that was used to put you down actually contains the seed of your potential. But you have to break this vicious cycle. Stop trying to be someone else. Stop waging war against your own existence. Adler taught us that only when we accept the fullness of who we are, the light and the shadows, do we begin to move toward true greatness. You don't have to become someone else. You have to free yourself from the lies that have convinced you that who you are is never enough. And when you begin to understand the depth of this transformation, it is time to take an even more decisive step. How can you overcome this inferiority complex in practice? How can you build self-esteem that is not dependent on the approval of others or on constantly comparing yourself to others? For Alfred Adler, healing from an inferiority complex was not a matter of repeating positive affirmations or masking the pain with distractions. It was not a matter of pretending the wounds did not exist or creating a false self-image based on empty achievements. For Adler, healing required a fundamental restructuring of the relationship with oneself and the world. And this restructuring begins with an act of grim courage, accepting responsibility for one's own existence. The first step is to finally give up the role of victim. You are not to blame for the scars you bear, but you are responsible for what you do with them now. Past events may have hurt you, but remaining hostage to those wounds is a choice you continue to make, consciously or unconsciously, every day. Adler reminds us that as long as we blame the past, other people, or circumstances, we remain powerless. True power comes when you say, "The story I begin to write from today on will be my own responsibility." The second step is to stop basing your identity on comparison. The inferiority complex thrives on constantly evaluating yourself in relation to others. It needs you to look around, to feel inferior, to want to be something or someone you are not. Healing begins when you give up this game. When you realize that there is no legitimate standard to reach, that your job is not to be better than others. Your job is to be whole in your own skin. Adler also offers a revolutionary principle, social connection. He argues that true overcoming of the inferiority complex occurs not in isolation, but through genuine connections with others. Not to seek approval, but to share a common purpose. For Adler, to live is to contribute, to participate, to feel useful and needed in the human community. When you find meaning beyond mere self-affirmation, inadequacy loses its power over you because the focus shifts from your wounded ego to the impact you can have on the world. Healing practice, then, involves three simultaneous movements: taking responsibility for your life, letting go of toxic comparison, and finding a purpose beyond the need for personal validation. But there is something even deeper that must be understood. Simply recognizing these steps is not enough. True transformation requires an internal break, a rebirth of your identity. And that requires courage. The courage to let go of the old version of yourself. The courage to face the emptiness that is created when the chains fall away. The courage to recreate yourself on a new foundation that is solid, real, undeniable. It is time to face a truth that few are willing to accept. No one is coming to rescue you from the prison you have built around yourself. No achievement, no praise, no external recognition will fill the void created by the belief in your own inferiority. This battle takes place in the solitude of your own mind, away from the applause, away from the spotlight. And it is a battle that only you can win. Your inferiority complex was taught to you. You learned to doubt yourself, to compare yourself to others, to put yourself down in the face of standards that were never intended for you to achieve. But now you know that what you learned can be unlearned. What was imposed can be rejected. The pain you carry is not proof that there is something wrong with you. It is proof that you survived a system that wanted to break you. Adler gave us more than just a psychological theory. He handed us a map to freedom. But a map is not enough. You have to walk. You have to face the discomfort. You have to rebuild yourself with your own hands, brick by brick. Not to become someone new, but to get back to who you already were, before you were taught to hate yourself. So now the choice is yours. You can go back to the old narrative. The one that says you're not good enough. That you need to be someone else to deserve respect, love, acceptance. Or you can take the first step to breaking that invisible chain and start writing your own story.